Everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Fiber Broadband Association webinar. My name is David. I am the webinar producer here at Fiber Broadband Association, and I appreciate you taking time to join us today. Today's webinar is titled Don't Trip at the Starting Line, Mastering Permitting Hurdles in Fiber Optic Design. So with that, I just want to go ahead and go through a couple quick housekeeping items here. First of all, you are in listen-only mode as attendees today. However, we want to hear from you. We will have time for questions at the end. So please do type your questions. You can type those questions into the Ask a Question tool, which is located in the lower left-hand side of your screen. We also have a number of different resources for you today. We have the resources are in a tool in the upper right-hand corner, and you can see several links there. And then also our speakers today, this is being presented by CCI Systems. They will be at Fiber Connect 2025. So if you're interested after today's meeting to book a meeting with them and to connect with them at Fiber Connect 25, please look in the lower left-hand corner, and there's an option to book that meeting. So with that, a couple of other quick things. This will be available on demand within 24 to 48 hours on our website. You can find it under the Events tab at the top of our website. And finally, we do have a very brief feedback survey at the end of today's webinar. If you could take a moment to respond to that survey, it helps us out quite a bit. And so let's go ahead and jump right in here. So we're very pleased today to be joined by the team from CCI Systems, who will be discussing the critical importance of starting projects with a strong foundation, particularly in fiber optic design and permitting. We're joined by Corey Rospico, who is the Senior Operations Manager for Permitting. We also have Chad Kay, Senior Director of Technical Operations at CCI Systems. And finally, John Scott, the GIS Program Manager at CCI Systems. So as I said, they're going to share their insights, real-world case studies, and strategies to navigate common challenges like utility conflicts, agency issues, and pole availability, while emphasizing how early collaboration between design and permitting teams can prevent costly delays. And with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Chad to get us started. So Chad, take it away.
Fantastic, David, and thank you, and good morning and good afternoon to everybody. As David said, a lot of things can happen as you progress into a project, whether that's weather, equipment issues, material delays, but more of a common factor may be permitting and project timeline based around design. So today we want to talk about how to overcome some of those hurdles, or at least to mitigate some of the time spent on permitting design to help you get a good start. And as we said, avoid tripping at the starting line. Also, as David has advised, please enter in questions as they come up. We're going to try to address those as we go through the slides if we can, the best we can. But worst case scenario, we'll address them towards the end, or even give you the opportunity to reach out to us directly. Again, my name is Chad Kay. I'm proud to present my teammates here with CCI that are going to be helping. First is Corey Rospico, as David mentioned. Corey comes with 20 years of experience in the permitting field, especially. So he's got a lot of great information to share with us. Also joining me today is John Scott, 16 years of GIS background expertise to help show how permitting, GIS, and design all come together to make sure that you have a good start, good initial start of your project. So there are many complexities to the fiber optic design, as we alluded to. Permitting and GIS is a critical first step. So overcoming some of these design phase challenges between utility conflicts, agency requirements, and risk mitigations is one of the big keys that we want to cover today. Also, early incorporation of permitting and GIS help prevents costly redesigns, whether it's midway through the project or towards the end of a project when things are just trying to wrap up and achieve getting to that finish line. One of the biggest parts for me as being a consultant at CCI Systems is our first step is typically high-level designs. One big step to avoiding pitfalls is by doing a high-level design, we're actually engaged with our permitting team, and we're engaged with our GIS team to have that first initial route draft. So what does that do for you? What it does for us particularly is it gets us our first look at average aerial versus underground cost modeling, total homes passed versus homes available, which has for funding, which tends to be a conversation as of late, and material needs to come up with a more accurate first high-end cost. Also, utilizing high-level design as a first step allows the customer to get the first glance and road approval. What this does for everybody on the team is to clear up any gray areas as to where the customer intends to build out, and it offers a direction for our walk-off team, our permitting team, and our design team. So it gets that first prioritization, avoids errors right out of the gate, and mitigates a lot of risk and high cost. So with that, we do want to say that with this high-level design, our permitting team and GIS team gets the first jump into the right direction, which that leads us right into our first polling question. So for your projects in the past, have you used high-level design, or is it even a consideration? As you read through your questions or your answers that you see on your screen, have you ever used them before? Have you considered using high-level designs? A lot of comments that I get is, does this actually pay off in the end? Is this a wasted cost? So we're really curious to get some of your feedback here. And Corey, I do want to tee that up as a question for you. What has been your take as of late on high-level designs and how that's helped the project?
Well, we're really excited because we're starting to see that that trend start to utilize high-level design. So really curious to see what the results are going to vet here today to help guide our conversations. But I'm happy to see that as of recent, there's more of a focus on that high-level design and integration with the permitting and GIS groups up front on most current projects.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly. One of my biggest concerns was always this is kind of a wasted cost structure. I think one of my favorite lines was, well, I can do this on a bar napkin and hand it off and we can figure it out. But as of late, with some of the funding agencies, it's not necessarily the case, where it turns into you have to have a better plan, better strategy, a better idea of how you're going to go after this and make sure that your cost estimates are fairly close. So kind of curious, we're slowing down on the amount of people answering. So let's take a look here. And wow, happy to report, and I'm actually very happy to see 64%. That's fantastic. 7% recently incorporated. I would assume that's a lot of the grant funding, enforcing that. 14% are interested in learning more about it. Fantastic to help with that. And then never done a high-level design for the other 14%. Would love to have a conversation with those folks personally. But I guess with that, Corey, I do want to hand it over to you and help us understand how high-level designs, but then also more importantly, what changes we've seen in permitting that help a successful job start up.
Yeah, I got to echo. I'm really excited to see those high numbers, and they always do high-level design. So hopefully that a lot of this information that we're going to share today resonates and provides some best practices for sure. All right, so progressing the slide here. Hello, everybody. Corey Resipko, CCI Operations Manager for Permitting. Really blessed here today to be able to have this platform to talk to all of you out there regarding permitting and a lot of what we're seeing in the industry, and specifically talking in the space of what are our risks of not incorporating permitting in those concepts up front, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about increased administrative costs, redesign, rework expenses, escalations of labor costs, talk into some proactive permitting considerations, also about the collaboration and communication, along with risk management and mitigation. So it's a big mouthful, a lot to unpack there. So really looking forward to interactions from the questions from the audience here, and then Chad and John's inputs as we talk through these. So I'd like to start about administration, increased administrative costs, and outlining how sometimes neglecting permitting requirements up front can lead to in those increased administrative costs I've just mentioned. Also the need for last minute adjustments and expedites to get your permitting needs met. A lot of times we often see that if permitting is sometimes an afterthought, although it's an important component to being able to construct your projects out there, failure to integrate this up front leads to having to add additional resources to handle design changes potentially if it's not considered up front. The rework expenses associated with that as well also are a large impact to these groups. We try to take that due diligence and proactive approach to mitigate a lot of what we're here to discuss. The financial impacts of design or construction reworks, as we're probably all aware, we want to mitigate those as much as possible. And how do we do that with these overruns? And a lot of what we've been able to help our clients with and what we've seen in the industry is that by partnering with our GIS groups along with our permitting teams to bring this information to the forefront allows for more informed decision making from our clients up front in order to determine best routes and be able to have those conversations up front. Again, mitigating your risk of falling behind on your projects. The delivery of said projects, right, is your lifebloods out there. We need to ensure that your projects are delivered on time and on budget, and a lot of that has to do with the upfront due diligence and planning. Additional challenges that we tend to find are, limited availability to information. So challenges that evolve from our regulatory landscape, along with the increased focus on coordination and collaboration with our clients for their needs of the project. With the risk management mitigation, how do we outline of making sure that the requirements lead to success? And that's where we put a real emphasis, again, on the due diligence factors, partnering with our GIS groups. We want to make sure that we have as many of the requirements from said agencies ahead of time to be able to flow that into a GIS model that can then be articulated in a graphical representation to have these conversations with the decision makers and our project owners to say, what is the best route to attack your design work? Having this information up front, we feel, is critical, and having it graphically represented through a GIS platform, again, helps to bring those conversations to a better light. We have a real point of emphasis on being able to drive those decisions with that information directly to anybody that's on the design side. So what does that mean? Let's say, for instance, the high-level design route might traverse through, railroads, Army Corps of Engineers, water districts, those types of things that aren't really seen from a 10,000-foot view on a KMZ, right, in Google Earth. It requires that deeper dive and due diligence. And that's where we feel the synergies in partnership with our GIS groups and the design teams with these inputs help really refine and create a high-level design that can then flow into the field for survey work and then ultimately result in a design that would have, minimal rework based on survey information that would be concluded from that. And I know it's a mouthful and a lot to unpack there. Looking for Chad, John, any inputs there for me on, kind of where I was taking us down that lane?
Actually, we had a question come in that does touch base on one that I was going to ask you directly, but Robert asks, how do you navigate increasing municipality permitting requirements in areas with little to no GIS data available? And that's definitely one that I had for you, Corey. I don't know if you got a quick response or something that you could answer and slowly hand off to John. That's up to you.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that is becoming a greater need, especially with the grant funding that's available. A lot of underserved areas, right? A lot of times you'll go into towns that the mayor is also the sheriff and is also the clerk of courts. So, and they might not have the ability or resources to have a robust GIS platform. So we do see that. How do we combat that, or how do we suggest going about that? A couple of things. Really focusing on creating those personal connections directly with those agencies, whether that's telephone calls, emails, on-site visits, but getting those points of contact are absolutely key. And then understanding what the ordinances are, because a lot of times they have ordinances that were written many years back and haven't caught up with the need for how we need to deploy infrastructure into their areas. So working with our GIS department and John, where we find this information, we then take what we find from that due diligence and hopefully articulate that back over to John's group to be able to kind of map out what does that look like. Do we know that there's easements available to us? Who are those decision makers? That all gets compiled, refined, and then filtered through our GIS team there. So hopefully that in broad strokes covers what you're looking for there. I might also add, right, John, a lot of times in these smaller municipalities or agencies that don't have the GIS teams, they rely on all of you out there really sometimes to help with some of the as-builting events that go on out there. So sometimes they will have even more stringent requirements in some of the major municipalities because those municipalities already have predetermined departments and fiscal budgets to mine that information themselves through their own means. So when we turn this over to John's team, a lot of times this stuff gets published and then is requested by those agencies as an additional byproduct to help them understand what's going on in their jurisdictions. John, anything you want to add?
No, well, kind of, yes. And so given that the entities may not have, their GIS data available, things like that, you go one step above, right? You go to the county. Does the county have any of this available information? The county, in all reality, should have shapefiles, should have an online geodatabase for, its community to look at and know where things are and all of that. Not always the case, but usually, right? And so then you run into the problems with sharing of information. Not all counties are created equal. They don't always share the same information as the previous county you worked with. So what to do when they don't give you the information that you're looking for? Right-of-way information, public utility easements, any and all utility data that they have on file. If you can't buy it, there's entities that, won't give it to you just because it's information they don't want to share. And so in that case, Corey, I think that we would do calling and locates, 811 tickets, things like that. It takes, and that hinders the project a little bit, but that goes back to the permitting due diligence at the beginning of your project, where you need to plan for those types of setbacks. And that could really debilitate a project that needs to move fast. And so if you don't know that information up front, that could be an issue down the road.
Yeah, great points. And I love how you also mentioned, going to that next level of government, right? Sometimes the local agencies don't have it, go to that county. Sometimes the state will have it. So again, additional resources that are provided through the due diligence phase to find that. And I think to piggyback, I see another question here about the best way to obtain that information for use on permits, right? There are multiple best practices. We typically look for anything digital because that's the easiest to ingest and work with. And then we scale or step down from there. It's, what do we have digitally? Okay, what can we get, sent to us? What do we have to go and obtain? So best ways to do that is really find the point of contacts again within those municipalities and work through that. A lot of times they sit on information that they don't know how valuable it is to, those of you that are wanting to deploy your services in a permitting phase. So, having someone be able to consult you on what best practices are and what information to look for can definitely help set you up for success there.
So Corey, we do have one more if you want to take a question right before we jump into the poll. But I feel like this is relevant between yours and John's conversation right now. Catherine asked, how often or in what percent and in what scenarios do you see JHAs asking for pre-construction photos of proposed utilities? And there is a follow-up question to that, asking for, or in context, is asking for an understanding of how much permitting can actually be done remotely, which I think is also relevant. I think that's a great call out.
Yes, great questions. So let me address first how much permitting can be done virtually or online. I am not a huge proponent of trying to permit and engineer from a desktop. I know there is a purpose for it. Not my favorite, personal preference. But I would say remotely, if you have good data, be it GIS data from those agencies or information that you can get ingested and turned into, again, something usable in a GIS system that can be articulated into whatever required output that the agency is requiring, you can kind of define success through that. My experience is that we have more revision requests or comments from reviewers when we take on projects that are strictly desktop rather than having specific survey, boots on the ground survey information data come into us. There just seems to be more challenges there. So let me go back to the question here, read through and make sure I'm covering it all. So I'd say a percentage. How about that? A decent percentage can be done remotely, but again, I feel you have a much better success rate having information flowing from the field. And then for the JHAs asking for pre-construction photos of proposed utilities, that's becoming more and more of a norm and not an exception. We've had some projects primarily in the Florida market where we had to, help facilitate, whatever streets we were going to help permit or engineer for required, a video walkthrough of what the areas look like before construction. Does that provide value? I say yes, because it does document your pre-existing conditions, but it really relies based on the timing of when those photos are taken to when you get out there and construct. So although good to have, best practice, we always recommend that the construction folks also take, their photos and videos prior to that construction start. But it is becoming more and more, and I think that is from our experience. Again, these areas are seeing so much growth so quickly that they may not be able to keep up with what their changes are in the field. So we're helping facilitate, showing them here's what it looks like today and what it's going to look like after we're done. So hopefully I answered that question for you.
No, fantastic. And I'll actually just one more real quick for you, Corey. Jill did bring up a great point that the NTIAs does have online mapping that they call out a lot of the permitting and environmental. I will say personally from the consulting side that I use that quite extensively. And then kind of to tag off of your response, Corey, from a high level design, I use what I would call out is permitting issues, quote unquote, as I see them from a virtual or from a desktop view. And then I'm able to hand that off to the permitting team and the GIS team for boots on the ground verification of that. So if it's from the front end of it, from high level design, we can get in front of it from a virtual perspective, whether that's through, like you said, through Google KMZ, through the NTIA's website to actually feed that intel, give us that expectation of what could be in the way, and then hand it off to the permitting and GIS team to actually be boots on the ground to validate it, so get ahead of the curve. So for my response, I would say I use it a lot more, just on a high level design aspect. But then, yeah, for your response, Corey, I completely agree. It's more about the information that's factual and real in the field.
Yeah, great Great questions out there. And yes, and we do rely also on those data sources, along with many others that are available. And I think that's something also important to highlight too. And I don't want to steal John's thunder. Hopefully he'll be talking about this as well. But there is a ton of free GIS information out there to help self-service when you're doing your own due diligence for your high-level design phases. So if John touches on that in his slides, we'll cover it there. Otherwise, maybe we can have some time to circle back about what those are. Feel free to engage me through the contacts for that additional information. Love to talk through that. And if there's any other tips and tricks, best practices, feel free to continue to share those in the Q&A. Really appreciate that. I know I'm getting up on my time here, but I just really wanted to quickly touch on a couple additional challenges in permitting around the evolving regulatory landscape. I know we talked primarily on the available GIS data. I think it's also important that I know we are also aware in the joint use space, the challenges that are there as well in that evolving regulation. With Title 47 through the FCC continuing to try to make things more palatable. I don't want to say easy because I know it's not. They continue to help putting the shot clock together for applications, self-service. So working with an engineering service provider such as CCI, we take a great pride in making sure that we understand what that Title 47 does and be able to help guide our clients and other agencies out there to understand what Title 47 enables all of you to do in order to get your permitting across the finish line and attach the poles. Although not necessarily easy, but more palatable is what I would call it. So gladly talk to the group about that maybe at another time, but definitely a lot of information that we can share in that space as well. With that, I think we can move on to our next poll. And if we have time, we can circle back to a couple other items in permitting as questions persist.
Perfect. Thank you, Corey. So how many people currently have GIS information for their maps and that they run in their systems today? And one of the questions that I fed into this is, are they paper? Are they PDF copies? I've seen a lot of that. Mylar was kind of in there as a joke, so I hope everybody kind of understands that. If you've been in the field long enough, you know what a Mylar print is. But basically trying to ask how much of your content today or your system today is actually, data driven, something you can email with ease or actually have GIS backing behind it to actually send it to, I would say as far as like, Mr. John Scott, who will be introducing shortly here, so that he can run with all the intel and get your system tuned up as soon as possible. I guess, John, I don't want to put you on the spot, but what's your most common feedback on what you've seen if a customer is they're GIS prepared or they're not unprepared? What's your thoughts on that as of late?
It depends on the size, really. I mean, if like Corey was mentioning before, we're the mayor's the sheriff towns, it's usually either no data or it's all paper, right? They don't even have it scanned into PDF. But 30,000 people in the town, they most likely have some type of a GIS system that they're working with. Sure. So usually we get data, KMZ format. It's easy enough for somebody to use Google Earth to provide us with a route or, any of the information that we need up front in order to do a job. But that's usually the case in my experience, is either KMZ or database form for 30,000 people or more within a community.
I guess before we jump to the results, are you seeing a lot of hybrid situations where you see 3 different options? Is that a thing as of late? I know I personally just ran into it, but I wanted your feedback on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Really it's a culmination of all the answers that we have here provided for people to give, right? So you can get a KMZ file, but then actually they have a previous design that they've created and it's, in PDF format, but then all of the easement information and everything else is in a plat map and that's paper, types of things like that. And so we kind of have to merge and collaborate with 3 different types of data functions in order to, bring about the final product that we start with.
Yeah, sounds good. And I think we're coming to the end of our poll here, so let's see what we got here. So, yeah, wow, a lot of good information here. Handful on paper, a small amount on PDF, but I'm happy to see 0 as no data provided.
I was just about to mention that.
So I don't know what your take is on it, John, but this is very impressive.
No, that's about right. I mean, I think that the world is going in a different direction right now, and everybody's kind of getting with the times. And so geodatabases, shapefiles, KMZs, KMLs, other digital formats are definitely the route everyone is taking right now. And so that kind of matches what's going on in the world, I think.
All right, sir. Well, I'm gonna hand it right off to you.
Okay. All right. Well, with that being said, we're gonna move on to our next slide. To our mapping and data discussion. So high-level design to low-level design. Not sure if you wanted to speak to that or if you wanted me to, Chad or Corey. But really, if we have a high-level... go ahead, Chad.
I apologize, John. I was just going to say, I'll tee it up. I will say, like, in our very first slide, talking about high-level design, it's not a wasted venture, and it's not a wasted cost. That route determination, and obviously working with Corey's team on some of the walk-off and permitting aspects of it, gives it to John and the GIS team with some clarity, right? We're not asking if a route is good or bad, or if it's been, if you can even bore underneath something, or if you can actually attach to a pole. A lot of it's been validated through those 2 processes. So from my perspective, that's where low-level design gets expedited. Your timeline decreases, so it's definitely a huge investment. But the time's just something you can't buy. So it's one of those advancements into getting the project stood up and moving quicker. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that, John, but that's always been my take.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a high level design to start with. I mean, that helps with the field walkout. That helps with a very high level bill of materials that the customer is able to anticipate what their costs might be, and then the return of accuracy over things that just popped up during fielding. Right, that determines what a low level design actually should be, as accurate as possible. Right, and that in itself helps with the cost adjustments moving forward. Once you solidify a low level design, I mean, yes, there's always the case where if you have to do an environmental feasibility study or something like that, it may come back that you need to do a route change. That's always a possibility. But for the most part, solidifying the low level design is usually the end of the road for that.
And something that I'd like to add to that, John, that
Sure.
high level design piece, as we're talking about the importance of it, right? All this upfront study and understanding, right, should drive that decision making and design, final, low level design or final design deliverable. So the more emphasis you put in at this high level, the better product you're going to get on the back end of that. So as you talked about, those inputs become increasingly important.
Yeah, and it helps for accuracy of GIS moving through the project as well. And it's all a good thing to have. Like everybody else, most of the people on this call use high level designs, which is great. I appreciate everybody's feedback on that. Feasibility and financial impact. The value of due diligence, like we said before, I mean, if you if you start a project and you didn't realize that the entities that you were looking for permitting didn't have the utility data that you were looking for. If you didn't research this before, then now you're starting behind before you even got ahead. This also can anticipate the constructability on the back end. It makes everything move faster if you do due diligence. Everybody has all of the information that they need in order to do their job moving forward. So nothing gets pushed back. Construction doesn't, have to make changes on the fly because things have not been approved for permitting, but they're already teed up to start, and X, Y, and Z. And that also is, circles back to the project schedule. Everything needs to move fluidly in a project. It wastes money. Budgets get ripped apart by all of these things not being done.
Yeah, agreed. Whether it's BEAD or grant type funding, or whether you're getting a shot in the arm with, private equity or whatever your business model might be, we are all concerned with the feasibility and financial impacts of, the engineering phases. So we strive as an extension of all of our clients as a business partner to help provide that data-driven intelligence in these phases to help make sure that you're successful on that back end. I don't think we can stress that enough.
Yeah. And Jamie's question that I'm reading right now kind of relates to what we've been talking about, what I'm going to talk about a little bit more in this next section here. She says, can we speak to the concerns from for an example, utility providers in the fiber space who do not want to digitize their network due to network security concerns? How do you have conversations around this? I mean, to be honest, it's up to the entity. If they don't really want to digitize their things, they don't have to, right? They have all of the information that they have. They have a system set in place in their little section of the world, and it's our job to adjust to it. And so if they don't want to digitize, I mean, I would offer my services to digitize it for them, because that's really what you're going to end up having to do anyway, right? You're going to take their information that they have on paper and digitize it to form around your project. And
we follow all the applicable. Sorry, John. I was going to say, and we follow all the applicable, NDA requirements, whether it's from those agencies, the permitting agency, or our clients. So that information, although digitized, does get, put into sensitive documentation that goes to these permitting agencies. So depending on their, privacy laws and stuff like that, we can kind of combat that. I felt it was just something that I just recently had a situation, John, I think you were part of this, right? Where we have utility companies and private owners that don't want to provide this information. So we have challenges in that space, but to combat that, we look at the ordinances. A lot of times the franchise agreements for these, comms owners, electric, whatever the utility might be, within their franchise agreements have clauses in there that they have to provide as-built documentation. Now, the proprietary information can be stripped off of that in order to facilitate John's group being able to take that information, digitize it so we can get it from a permitting lens, and then put that into a CAD drawing or something to meet the needs of the permitting requirements.
Thank you, Corey.
John, sorry.
No, you're fine. That's exactly right. And and there's some entities or some counties, when you're going and looking for utility data, GIS data, right of way, parcel layers, things like that, they make you go through like kind of a 3-step process in order to verify. There's an NDA being signed. There's data transfer documents. There's certain things that you have to overcome with that county in order to obtain the information. And really, I mean, we just have to do whatever we have to do to get it. And it's because that means whether or not we're going to have to call in 811 tickets or call in locates and draft all of this information onto the prints or onto the maps, that will take, however long that takes. But that also needs to go into consideration in the beginning of the project.
Yeah. And then also the timing factor, right, John? Trying to obtain this information, these multiple requests aren't necessarily a one and done type of situation. It takes multiple follow-ups.
Right.
Again, 811 utility locate services, depending on your region, you know, also have different requirements from their participants. Just because the utility information is requested through an 811 service does not mean that they facilitate or require engineering tickets to be fulfilled. So we also have to take the next approach, whether my team in permitting or John's group over in the GIS, to make additional contacts with, you know, whatever utilities ownership are reported back through that utility locate ticket, and then make individual requests to those agencies for this information. And that's the you know, next level of service that this group here provides.
Right. And those like you see on the slide, those are challenges faced due to lack of GIS data, just like Jamie's question alluded to. You also need to evaluate the state GIS data. You know, it's not always that most accurate. It's sometimes not been updated for years and can lead you down the wrong path, right? You know, you think you have solid data, then all of a sudden you submit a permit, and then what the county has doesn't match what the state has. You know, things, they don't always go hand in hand and talk to each other, so you just need to do due diligence on that part as well. And then pain points for companies without GIS data, we've talked a lot about it, and I think that we all kind of get the point, right? You know, people that don't, or entities that don't have GIS data, companies that don't use GIS data, it's a lot harder to get the project off the ground, but it's not impossible. So best practices for, you know, permitting and GIS data requires us to just work together in the beginning to kind of understand each other's processes in order to get the most out of each department, to ensure that we're going to have a nice flow for the rest of the project and stay on task and complete deadlines and XYZ.
Yeah, it's important to have those synergies with those groups, and the more collaboration and I would say transparency of information, right, and being able to have that free flow of exchange, again, it all just bolsters the success of the projects. And again, I think having that information to have data-driven decision making is critical and pivotal to the success of the upfront stages of the planning phase.
Agreed. Chad, do you have any thoughts on that?
Couldn't have said it better myself, guys. Honestly, our key takeaway is pretty much button that right up. I think it's perfect. If you want to advance to the next slide, I think we're right there.
Absolutely.
So, you know,
yeah. I'm excited to dive into some of these questions here pretty soon.
So successful high-level designs require careful planning. Don't skip out on the careful planning on the front and the beginning of your fiber project. Obviously, to Corey's point, permitting should be considered at the outset of your project. Requirements, regulations, red tape can always affect the overall cost and timeline to the project, and as we talked about and discussed today. And then also, obviously, you know, as John explained, you know, the state of the union as far as GIS data is becoming more relevant. So the folks that are on paper and PDF, I would advise to get in touch with John or someone like John to start getting everything digitized and over into a GIS format. Obviously, I would say, you know, as far as permitting agencies and just natural requirement is all becoming electronic nowadays. So, you know, those that are on that paper and PDF, nothing against you. I'm old school myself, but it's a necessity. We gotta keep up with the times. Everything's becoming electronic, and it'll help you out in the long run. It's a cost, but it will pay dividends towards the end of your project. It'll again, you can't buy time. So obviously, this is all about saving time and being efficient through the start and the finish of your project. With that, and I know David alluded to this, you know, if there's something that comes to mind, please feel free to reach out to this whole CCI team. But if you're going to be at Fiber Connect, please stop by and see me at booth 227. We'll be there for the full extent of the show. And I want to take just a quick moment to thank Mr. Corey Recipico and Mr. John Scott for joining me today. And then with that, I definitely want to turn this back over to David and thank David and the FBA for allowing us to present to everybody today.
Yeah,
sure. And I just want to extend my thanks. This has been a great conversation. We've gotten a lot of great questions. We actually have a few more questions, if you don't mind. We have the time to go through some of them. So I'd be happy to go through. Let's see here. So we have somebody who's asking, how do you keep track of data between groups? What is the most efficient way?
So I'll kick that one off because I'm a huge data guy, right? And I love traceability. Utilizing the GIS systems along with multiple other options out there, being able to set up a consistent workflow from start to finish to make sure, again, like I talked about, that free transfer of information, that's critical. And then now that GIS, per the poll, right, is becoming a staple in our industry and something that we use, that information is able to be articulated in so many different ways. Whether it's graphically through charts and plats and stuff like that, heat maps, all that information that's there can be disseminated in multiple fashions. So we utilize just about every medium that's possible, and the connections with our clients through APIs, stuff like that. The flow of information is absolutely pivotal. So we definitely leverage those tools to make sure that that's happening.
So this one should be really simple to answer. What is the biggest challenge in permitting?
Biggest challenge in permitting. Wow. There's so many small challenges, like, death by paper cut, right? Sometimes it almost feels like, but I would think in my experience, the largest challenge for us is just making sure that permitting is thought of on the onset. So it's not necessarily the agencies that create the challenges, it's the projects that create the challenges of, permitting being an afterthought. So, kind of shift that question around and look at it more inwardly, right? So if permitting is at the onset, that's going to help you mitigate a lot of those challenges that you see when you have to try to rush through permitting on the back end or in the middle of a project. So I would say the biggest challenge we see in permitting is that it's not thought of early enough in the engineering design phase.
Great advice. Somebody has asked, what software does CCI use?
Probably a quicker answer to say, what don't we use? We've used, I believe, and Corey and John, keep me honest here, but I think we have just about every piece of software known to man right now. I mean, we even have some outdated stuff that I won't even mention on this call, but I think we have everything available to our fingertips.
Yeah,
just about. Go ahead.
Oh, a little bit of delay there. I was just gonna say, and then I'll throw it right back to you, John. We custom tailor our software use, and we do have a large pool to pull from, but we refine what is needed by our client or an agency in order to facilitate whatever business need is required.
Yeah, and to be more specific within CCI's walls, as far as GIS goes, I mean, we're an Esri-based company. We use Esri products. For splicing, Vetro, we use Vetro, and AutoCAD, normal GIS tools. But to Corey's point, to cater to our clients, if our client has a new software that they are using or something that's different from what we are using, we do our best to accommodate that piece of software and or learn it ourselves and help the client facilitate that.
Yeah, probably one.
My recommendation to the group.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Corey.
No worries. I was just going to say, my recommendation to the group is that if you are looking for establishing platforms or what type of software, feel free to reach out to us and Chad as a consultant. Got some really great probably advice we can provide you. But here on this cast, I would say keep it cloud-based, folks. Right? Google Google Earth, if I can say that here, right? Not getting paid. The platform serves its purpose, but as soon as you save that KMZ or that KML and you ship it off to somebody, it's old news. It's no longer relevant if you make any changes. So I'm a huge proponent of cloud-based technologies to ensure the collaboration is clean across all business units.
Well, that actually makes my answer twofold now. So thanks, Corey. So, obviously, if you're doing your exploratory in Google Earth, obviously check the dates and times and stamps on what your imaging is looking at. I've seen some outdated design come in with what you just mentioned, Corey. But I guess one of the kudos at CCI is we work with a lot of different vendors on beta testing some software too. So, even if it's something you have that you're hearing the latest and greatest about, please reach out to us. There's quite a few vendors that we work with that we're great as partnering with beta testing for those vendors, and we might have some insight for you to share there also.
Yeah, and that just sparked another previous question, Chad, right, about how much can we do permitting, online or virtually desktop, and you hit the nail right on the head. Something I failed to mention, but look at those Google Earth Street View dates, because a lot of times they're from several years back, and maybe a weather event has gone through there and decimated some areas, or there's been rebuild. That's not always indicative of those street views that you're looking at. So it does again create the challenges for permitting utilizing that desktop theories.
So let's see, one of our registrants asked, what is the best way to obtain city utility information for use on permits?
That would be through the county, looking for GIS data layers. That's the easiest way, I would say. Corey, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I apologize, Dave. I didn't hear the full question that you read off there, but I believe it was, how do we get the information from the agencies?
Well, they're asking specifically about city utilities. What's the best way to receive get the permitting information about utilities?
Yeah, establishing that line of communication to the agencies that own those is a great step in the right direction. Review the websites, look for GIS data. So it's really about putting together a checklist. And again, we talk about workflow. So it's like, all right, start at step A, go to step B. If A is not available, go to B, and then you just kind of go down the line. And again, hence the reason why it's extremely important, right, that we start these earlier rather than later, because you might not always get step A to get you the information that you need.
And along those lines, another registrant had actually asked if they have any tips for working with railroads.
Yes, I did see that one come through. Railroads always tend to be, a scary word. We know it's a long lead time in many instances, but working with the railroads, in my experience, if you understand the requirements in it, I think you can apply this principle to just about anything. But if you understand what the requirements are, or research to obtain those, when you talk to these agencies, they're very open to providing information and guidance from the novice, user, or breaking into a market, to the most seasoned permitting or GIS groups. They want you to succeed. They don't want to have multiple revisions and stuff like that. So just establishing that line of communication, understanding the requirements. REMA is a really good agency to work with and understand, because they provide all those specs for the railroads and kind of govern all that. So we take the initial time to go through those spec books. Understanding, again, we talk about long lead times. That's there. The railroads themselves all have unique requirements, right? Some require a full site survey that through a professional survey even, right? Some require professional engineering stamp. So understanding those requirements is what's going to drive your successes. But we're not afraid of railroads. They can be challenging depending on the areas and what you're crossing. But feel free to engage us with any additional questions or nuances and strategies, love to share them with the folks here. A lot to cover on that, but railroads, if you go into it with the mindset to learn rather than to tell them, they are much more accommodating to help guide you through that process.
We actually had this is a really interesting question that came in. David is asking, do you have suggestions for best practices when it comes to limiting the project scope for individual permitting agencies? For example, if a project crosses a small section of federal land, is it best to show that agency the entire project scope from the beginning, or limit what you share to only the portions of the project on or near their lands?
Oh, I absolutely recommend to all of our clients that if you have a large, whether new build or overbuild, greenfield, brownfield, whatever you want to call it, get that information to the agencies ahead of time and say, hey, this is where we're wanting to go, and here's our proposed. They appreciate that. They want to know what's going to be potentially forthcoming in their areas. And I will say that no information talking with municipalities is bad information. So if you're able, or unnecessary information instead of bad, because it helps just drive that conversation. And then, if you're identifying that, federal land, or, maybe it's, something with American Indian heritage, right, that we have to be concerned with. During that phase, we're able to then, provide navigation around maybe those set areas to feed from a different direction. And again, a lot of that input can come from those permitting agencies.
So better to share as much information as possible with some guidance.
Agreed.
Yeah, totally agree.
I think we have time for one or two more here. A lot of questions, which is great. We appreciate it. Somebody's asking, how do you accelerate the low-level design process, specifically when utility information is only available via PDF or other non-GIS records?
I have a theory.
I mean, I know my answer. It's typically, redraft it, or at least get it transferred over. But I'm curious, John, what's your take on that one?
Well, it's kind of hard to accelerate low-level design when you don't have layered GIS information, when you have to draft things. Getting the information into the GIS, digitizing it first thing, accounting for that time that it takes, is typically how you would accelerate the low-level design. I mean, low-level cannot start until fielding is done. Fielding can't start until maps are made for them to go out and field. It just depends on when you get that information into your maps, I would say, because design's going to have to design for avoidance, right? Right. And so if they don't know what's there, then they don't know what's there. And so then when it goes to be permitted, it doesn't get approved because it was designed too close to a utility that was existing that we didn't necessarily know about at the time it was designed. And so time is of the essence when you're inputting this information up front.
Well, and I guess I'll take that back for a quick second. Is one thought that I had as you were talking, John, is, even if you're doing walk-off, use them as a red line print so you can get the most accurate information over to the GIS team. So kind of doing your diligence on your walk-off, potentially, bringing a permitting team along with you has always been a thought process to help escalate some of those hurdles, so that all the information that's going into the GIS database is factual. I would add on to that.
Agreed.
Yeah. And then the final piece, because again, near and dear to my heart, about getting utility information non-GIS format. So whether it's a PDF, or sometimes we get a JPEG that looks like something that was from the 1990s Microsoft Paint. So to expedite that information in there is a manual effort. We are really accelerating our efforts to try to figure out, ways through AI to drive that information into the GIS group more timely, and to let them process it, because that's important information. So hopefully we are providing, whether it's in PDF or any other medium, getting that information transitioned into a GIS format before you're into your high-level design phase. That's our goal.
Well, thank you all so much. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate all the insight you provided and are sharing with us today. It looks like we are at time here, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. But before I do, I just want to hand it back to you. Any last words or takeaways to highlight here?
I guess starting from my perspective, I just wanted to say thanks for the opportunity to David, yourself, and Fiber Broadband Association. But again, advise anybody who's attending the Fiber Connect conference here coming up in Nashville. Please feel free to stop by us if you have additional questions, or reach out to this team after the call if something pops into your head and you have everybody always asks questions after the call, so I figure it's a good offer to reach out to us directly if you have any additional Q&A.
Absolutely, and we have that tool down in the lower right-hand side of your screen if you'd like to set up a conversation at Fiber Connect. We certainly look forward to seeing everybody there. And with that, I will go ahead and just wrap things up. Of course, we have a bunch of these webinars, so go out and have a look at our site if you want to see what's coming up. And we are looking forward to seeing everybody at Fiber Connect as well. And of course, we have Fiber for Breakfast every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, featuring Gary Bolton. And we'll have Jamie Linderman with Dia on next week. So we're looking forward to that. And with that, thank you again, everybody, for attending. We appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.